What's going on, guys, and apologies for not uploading regularly as I promised in last week, but I will be pumping out 2 to 3 videos this week here to compensate for it, and we're going to start it with this one, which is going to be a raid focused video. So let's get started, guys, with the most important class in the raid, a must-have, and that's the healers. We're going to be displaying 2 builds today. It's going to be the Splash Light and the DST healer. Splash Light became really popular in the expansion. It's also because of the meta itself, and the main reason it's become meta is due to the fact that there's been so many schizos. They're just constantly chain staggering you, knocking you on the floor. You're just not able to cast if you get close to try and heal up your group, and therefore Splash Light, you can heal from very far away and still get that value. Now, in regards to the builds, we're going to be showing 2 variations and 2 offense, as I mentioned before, the DST and the Splash Light. But first of all, we're going to be showing the Splash Light with the IG variation. You can do this with the Rapier, which is going to be the secondary weapon I'm going to be displaying. But as you can see, this is going to be the skill trees. The stats, you could go more focus and less con. This really depends on how much pressure you are actually getting. But I would say generally most healers are running like 200 to 300 con. In very difficult wars, they actually tend to have higher con just so they don't get blasted away by a melee just jumping on you constantly. And due to the fact that they're playing light, they need a little bit more health to compensate for it. What you will need though is Fortifying Sacred Ground on your gear and a Lifestaff here that has Refreshing Move, Blessed, and Divine's Embrace. Now there's actually a third perk you could interchange here. You don't have to go for Refreshing Divine's Embrace, but for the most part this is what they're running. The artifacts that you're looking at is the Featherweight. The Featherweight's going to be increasing your armor ratings exponentially. On top of that, you can also get Fortification increase from the Sacred Ground, the Ice Gauntlet abilities, which will also escalate your armor ratings. And with the Healing Tomb perk on the Ice Gauntlet, you're going to get close to 3000 HP pop whenever you come out of it. Gotta make sure though that you don't instantly weapon swap afterwards, because if you do, you're not going to get that Healing Tomb heal. Now, the double single target build is not as popularized as it once used to be, but it's still a great build for uptime if you are able to free cast. It's still the go-to in arenas just due to the fact that it's very easy to get uptime since there is only going to be 3 other people you're versing. But as for the raids, it really depends on your role, and it depends on the meta that you're playing against on your server or the guilds that you're facing. However, I wanted to include this build, including the Rapier as well, which you can use for the Splash Light build or for the double single target build. I mean, the Rapier build in general you can use for any Lifestaff build you want. But, of course, you're going to have the same Lifestaff at hand here with the Sacred Ground perk. You want to use the Featherweight artifact once again, as discussed, just to increase your armor rating. And of course, the Sundering Riposte is a nice addition into your Rapier, because if you do get the Rends on them and your teammates follow up, they're just going to get blasted apart. Now let's move on to the next build, and that's going to be the big boss, the tank build with the SNS. You're going to always have at least one of these per raid. Now, most guilds run 1, some guilds run 2, but when they do run 2, they kind of run the variation of SNS Flail or SNS IG, one of them mostly to absorb damage, the other one to be a little bit more of a utility takeover tank. But we're going to just talk about the SNS Flail for the meantime, and this build in specific is just a monstrosity. Combined with healers that have a lot of uptime, it's almost impossible to kill them in this path. Of course, utilizing the SNS, you're going to be weakening the enemy, but also fortifying yourself. It's reducing any incoming damage that comes towards you as well as to your teammates. And also with the shield right click, you're also going to be applying a 30% damage reduction to everyone around the vicinity. With the addition of the flail, you're going to be able to remove the CCs with Vortex for your teammates. You're also going to be applying more sustainability for the army, while at the same time debuffing the enemy team. In terms of the items itself, I've added the Odo here. Not everyone likes the Odo, but it's a pretty easy to obtain artifact. You're going to be applying Burdening Smite onto it, which is going to make it very difficult for people to have a lot of uptime on their abilities, especially since this does work in AoE. You can Burdening Smites on a clump, and they're all going to be affected by it. Combined with the Ankh and Wall, you're going to be extremely tank. Whenever you don't want to use the sword and shield right click, you're going to be left clicking with the Odo, getting Refreshing Move, more ability uptime, and just in general providing that utility and debuffs that your army requires. And next up, in my opinion, we got the biggest stat pad build in the raid, but it's not just that bad. It's utility, okay? It's disease, it's weakens, it's rents, it's a little bit of everything. It's the VGIG. Nowadays, regardless of playing quad or playing points, you're always going to be playing for those clumps. With the magnetic gloves, you're going to have insane up times when it comes to Oblivion spam, Orb spam, as well as the Scream. And these are the tools that's going to enable your quadrants to actually get kills. Alright, so we're going to talk a little bit about the stats, and of course here, as you can see, displays 350 focus, 250 con. It doesn't always have to be like this. You can run 300 con, 300 hint, you can run 350 int, and 250 con. You can also run the build that's displaying now, and it really just depends on like your stat distribution. It could also be due to the fact that you can't get the ideal stats thanks to the magnify. I don't like the magnify system. It's just making it very difficult to do what you want to get. But we're just going to be displaying this, but you can always interchange it however you want. Let's just call this the baseline. For this build, you're going to need the magnetic gloves artifact, and it's just to get that additional uptime on your ability casting. Next patch as well, you could use the Mastermind instead of the Ankh. The Mastermind ring is a ring that's going to be providing more skill damage but less basic attack damage, which is so relevant because you don't really care about lift click damage for a build like this, since you're always going to have uptime on your abilities thanks to the magnetic gloves. So that's going to be a really cool addition. Anyhow, you're going to need the Scream, you're going to need the Oblivion. I know some people like to apply the All perk on the weapon because it's a very high percentage and you can really remove all of their applications, for example, fortification buffs, very quickly with the Orb on the weapon. But for the most part, people are running Scream on it with the Oblivion on the gear. Next up, we got one of the most important roles, and it's been one of the most important roles for a very, very long time. You just cannot have an army without the Bruisers. And we're talking about the traditional Bruisers here, the GA Warhammers. There's obviously the int variations of it, but I'm not going to be showcasing that on this video because it's just not a traditional Bruiser. So let's talk about the pre-patch, the post-patch, and some gamble variations of how to play this insane class. Alright, so as all Bruisers have in common, you could go 300 strength, 300 con, but 350 con with Grit Ward is just absurd. Since you are mostly playing medium and not heavy, for a class like this, Shuriken Fortification is not going to be ideal. We also did mention the VGIGs played in this patch are constantly spreading their Oblivions, their Orbs, and therefore having Shuriken Fortification will lose a lot of value playing on the point. So Grit Ward, just a flat base damage reduction when you do Grit Frame, and we're going to be talking about the 250, 350 con builds. Pre-patch Bruiser here, as shown, you got your typical Wrecking Ball, Shocking Wave, Path of Destiny, combined with your stereotypical 3 abilities for the GA, and this is going to be the way you start up the fights. You're going to be dropping those grabs into the Shockwave. Sometimes you can mix it up with the Wrecking Balls, but Wrecking Ball in general just isn't what it used to be. You can't really combo as much as you could before, and that's why people have obtained to go for a different route. The different route being Armor Breaker. For the most part, people are skipping Wrecking Ball to go Armor Breaker. You get a fat ass rend, big damage that penetrates armor as well, an ability that is extremely good to just dog down targets on the points. But when it comes down to the artifacts, all of these builds have something in common. You're going to run the Ankh, you need a lot of uptime and survivability. You're going to be running the Tumbler Shoes because you're going to be constantly in and out of clumps. It's going to be very easy to trigger the Tumbler Shoes, so you're going to get fortification, you're going to get healing, and you're going to get empowerment. But must-have perks, obviously, it's going to be the Sundering Shockwave, and on top of that, the Gravity Well is really nice to have. Some people tend to skip it. It's still an increase of damage if you run it on the gear. So this is where things get a little bit spicy here with the addition of the Spark of Mjolnir. This is going to be converting your damage into lightning and increasing your lightning damage in general. The Gavel uptime is going to be insane. You're going to have a fat ass weaken. And honestly, Gavel right now is not so bad because it does give you grit. It does do a decent amount of damage. Even if it's just the first hit of the Gavel itself, you apply it in clumps, they're all going to get weakened. I mean, you are providing more utility this way and still having that extra damage instead of utilizing the Armor Breaker. And the last one I want to showcase here is with the Armor Breaker. You can skip the last point of the Armor Breaker here, but I was advised to put it in because he plays on the point and the armor breaker last point is giving you some life back. Combined with the ink, you're going to be applying a lot of rends, you're going to be applying a lot of weakens, and of course you're skipping the path of destiny, but when you're playing in the point, it's not as important. And for this build here, it's more focused on dogging down point players, especially those sword and shield builds that you need to get rid of their stamina, and therefore having armor breaker is extremely good. Once again, guys, I just wanted to mention, if you want to see more war footage, if you want to check out live content, check out my stream, twitch.tv Godot, and on top of that, go and follow my new channel. I'll be uploading very regularly war content. Other than that, make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I'll be bringing more builds to you. There's also going to be a flex build being covered very soon, and any builds I haven't covered, drop down a comment regarding it. Maybe I will cover it, but that's it. I'll catch you guys in the next one.